Hello and welcome to Sound Like, where today we're going to look at Citizen Erased. Guitar wise, we're using the Manson MA2 Evo and we're in drop A for tuning, and let's dive into pedal cam to see what we're using. Okay, so here we are at pedal cam with ambient bird song in the background. There we go. As you can see, we're on patch 2. We've not used this so far, so let's have a run through of what's in each preset. So patch A, we begin with the whammy, prime distortion and phase 90. Patch B, whammy, fuzz factory, big muff and phase 90. Patch C is whammy, overdrive distortion, phase 90, and finally patch D is whammy, blues driver and delay. So we're going to go through the song section by section, looking at each patch I use and the sounds that we're getting from the board. So let's get started. Okay, to begin the song we have the intro riff. So we're on patch A with the prime distortion, the whammy is off, tones just a bit to at 11 o'clock to give just a bit of brightness to it but not to overpower it. Distortion is all the way up because this is a big riff, and output is just right in the middle. So let's listen to what this sounds like. So that sounds huge. With the tones set the way it is, those harmonics that come through really have a chance to really come through very clearly. Obviously, because the harmonics, you really want those higher frequencies to come out really well, and for me, the prime distortion really works very well for that. So after that, the harmonic section, it then goes into the next riff. We're still using the prime distortion. So we're still on the prime distortion for this. For me, I just want that same level of distortion, that same level of punch to come through for this section. So when we come to the verse, we switch over to the overdrive distortion, so we have a different sound to play with. It's a bit duller, not as crisp, not as bright to listen to, so that kind of blends in better with the mix, since it's going to be used for quite a lot longer than the actual riff itself. So we're on patch C for the verse. We're only using the overdrive distortion, the whammy and the phase 90 are off for this section, so let's see what this sounds like. So this is just like any other overdrive distortion sound that I use for pretty much whenever I use it. Being the era it's in, Origin of Symmetry, I do have it leaning over more towards the distortion side of things, as we can see here on pedal cam. Drive is bang on 3 o'clock, not too much, but you certainly want a lot in there, and the tone setting is set to just about 12 o'clock. So that it's got a rich tone to it, but not overpowering. So there's not too many high frequencies being boosted there, but obviously it's not too low that it's just a really dull tone. You really want that to punch through clear enough, but not overpower. And it sounds great. So what I'm adding for the chorus is just a phase 90 pedal. It just adds a really nice texture to it. There's not many songs where I'm using the phase 90 in the chorus that I can really think of. Only other ones would be like Stockholm Syndrome, and that is all I can think of right now. So it just adds a little something else. The drive and the power coming through with the overdrive distortion is exactly what I want, so it's the same for the verse and the chorus. I just want that little something to kind of give that difference, its own identity when we move into the chorus. So that's the sort of thing you might want to think about if you are going to be trying to place as an erased of yourself. You don't have to completely change the distortion that you're using. You can just add a little texture. For me, this is done with the Phase 90. So let's hear what that sounds like. As we can tell, it's the exact same amount of distortion, with it being the same pedal and all. The Phase 90 just adds a really nice texture over the top of that. The speed doesn't matter too much for me. I just don't want it to be too fast, otherwise it'll sound weird. And being a bit too slow might drain some of the speed and the power out of your performance. So I just have it at about 10 o'clock just to give something to it. So that's it for tone. There's not too much you can do to vary up the choruses, really. You can... I sort of tend to kind of chop and change it between the chords and just playing the bass note with it kind of interchangeably, more towards the second run round of it, so it's just... it does strip it out, but it has more emphasis on the lower notes. It's the exact same octave as the bass, so it kind of does just double that up. That... if you were going to do that more regularly and just more on its own, you might want to roll off some of the higher frequencies to have more of a focus on the lower notes, just a bit. But for me, I like to kind of go right in the middle, so you've got the best of both of what's going on, and it sounds much bigger when you do use the chord. The next section, the quieter section, we come off of patch C, right over to patch D with the blues driver. Now, as we can see on pedal cam, the gain is just a fraction more at 9 o'clock, where the off position essentially is just at 7, so there's not a lot of there. For me, I just want it to have a little bit of punch through in this section. With it being patch D, we come off of Phase 90, and we have more emphasis on the delay, so we'll just take that off. So what does it sound like? So I switch over to the neck pickup for this, again, just to add more of a mellow tone. So what's that? So what's going on here? The delay is subtle for me. It's not going too much out of its way to really kind of hit you over the head with boom ambience. It's just quite subtle, but the amount of repeats is kind of key with this to give it that depth, give it something almost haunting in itself, and give a bit of a kind of spaciousness to your playing. Without it, it sounds a bit dull. It's definitely better with it. It's not trying to overpower. What does it sound like when there's a lot going on? Let's just... Too much. Let's just roll that. It really doesn't work when you start getting into that faster picking section. You definitely don't want the repeats to be louder or as loud as the initial notes going in, because there's quite a lot going on. So you want it subtle. That's why this section is key for subtlety. And that's it. So just a bit of bit of bite, a bit of crunch, just to kind of really pull out those notes. Without it, there's not enough there. It certainly stands out a lot more when you've got the rest of the song going on. You can just feel that. It wants to break out, it really does, but you don't let it, and that's what's great about it. So after that, then we go over to the even more mellow version, and I like to play around with the volume pedal for this. It's a bit difficult being sat down, so we're going to substitute that with the volume control on the guitar. Either I stick with the neck pickup like this, or I switch over to the sustainer, which automatically engages the bridge pickup, and that's what you have to play with that, which sounds like this. It's really dealer's choice at this, but for this section, if you've got a sustainer available. If you've not, you can still use either pickup. It's kind of what you want to hear. If you want a more mellow, more melancholy kind of sound, then stay with the neck pickup. If you want a bit more drive and bite behind it, then just stick on the bridge. The sustainer helps to keep the sustain, weirdly enough, on that. So those notes power through, really cut through, and it just goes on. It just goes on like that. Again, same settings the whole time. There's nothing being added or taken away at this section, and then until we get to the next part, where I sometimes use the whammy in the chords section position. Again, pickup doesn't really matter too much, but I take the sustainer off because you want these notes to die out. So to help kind of that along, we'll switch over to the neck pickup, and it sounds like this. Same as before, the same settings, but we've just used the whammy to emphasize the kind of higher notes to give it that nice harmony up octave. Without it, it's not taking away, or the whammy isn't adding too much when you deploy it, so it's without it, it's it certainly brings that kind of tone back down to earth. It sounds more ethereal when you use the whammy. So it's just, if you've got it available, you may as well use it, or think about using it for this section. May as well use the tools at your disposal. Or if you don't have a whammy and you're thinking about getting one, this might be an excuse to get one, along with many other songs that really sound great with a whammy. Then after that we go into another chorus, but it's a lot more of the stripped down chorus, and it sounds like this. Same as before, same settings, same patch, but the whammy is taken off definitely at this point. With the amount of bite or gain that we're using on the blues driver, really comes through for this section because you want to hit the strings a little more aggressively. Not obviously too much, but you want to hit them a lot more aggressively than we were earlier, so that extra bite really does come to help you out in this section. So that's why it works really well for this. Without it, it does not come through enough. So without it, it's taking away that bite and that crunch, but also with that, it does create a nice clean tone. Which on its own would be great, but you want to have that blues driver engaged to help launch it into the big riff when we go into that, which we'll look at now. Okay, so after the quiet parts of that song, we then break out into the riff as before. That's just going straight over to patch A as before, we don't need to cover that, and then after that it does the ascending riff, which is on patch C, don't need to cover that. Then the next bit that we're going to look into is the solo-y section. So for this I go into patch B, but I take off the delay and the fuzz factory, so we're just using the big muff. So then it sounds like this. So all that section really wants is just a big, loud distortion kind of, or fuzz kind of tone for it. And the big muff works really, really well for that. To use the prime distortion would add too many harsher, higher tones. Well, you may not have too many harsher tones, but it doesn't have the mid kind of tone rumble and power. And to use the overdrive distortion would be too much of a similar sound, because it is the same sound that we used just before it, so it wouldn't punch out, it wouldn't stand out as well, and it doesn't. To me, it doesn't have the drive. So that's why the big muff's in there. The fuzz factory comes out because the setting that I normally have it at, which is this, adds too much of the Velcro fuzz type sound. So we'll just give that a demonstration. It's too much. It's too weird. It's not straight hard enough. I need to up the stability for those higher notes to come through. Plug it with the big muff. It works, but the fuzz just adds a tone too much away from what is ideal. I don't use the delay mainly because the previous section is quite a long delay, and a longer delay doesn't work so well for this. I could tap tempo it in, obviously, but with the settings that we've got in terms of the level and the feedback, it actually would be quite overpowering. So we'll... On its own, it sounds great, but with the rest of the song going on, it's too much of a longer delay. And it just sort of like gets lost in the mix a little bit. The big muff I don't think it works terribly well with delay. So that's why I just take it off. Right, so the final section that we have for this, we go back over to patch D. So we're going to need the delay on. Nice. And there's actually a tempo change for this. It's just 10 beats less. We'll stick with the delay we've got programmed in. It will do the job. The effects are exactly the same as before, the same amount of crunch, and it's just on the neck pickup. it's nice to have that consistency of the low gain, the low drive from the blues driver. It's for these sorts of songs where there's a big contrast between loud and quiet, and the different kind of range and energy. For me, it's kind of important to have that consistency of tone when you're in these certain sections. So that's why the blues driver pedal I like this in a setting it's at is quite good. If you dial some of the gain off of the guitar, you'll strip out even more gain from the pedal, from the signal you get in the outcome. So we'll go from, just take a little bit out. Just adds that little bit of crunch, that little flicker at the end. So having that much with you can roll it off as much as you want. And a volume pedal makes it even easier to do that. So we can just get some of that in. So with it on all the way full, you can really feel it. It's really useful to have that sort of responsiveness built into your rig, really. So I would say a volume pedal is very useful. And then we go into the kind of the piano bit. And what I do personally, I actually switch up to my next patch, go on to patch A, which is just whammy, delay, and phase 90. Obviously, the whammy and the phase 90 aren't in this, but the key is that it takes the pedal out of it, but keeping the delay in. So we can actually just play the chords. Before the vocals come back in, you can strum quite, not hard, but you can give it a little bit of oomph. Mainly so that when the vocals do come in again, I switch over to patch D on this, which just brings in the blues pedal for this. It doesn't take away or add anything else. And now they then switch over to alternate picking. It gives it a lot more space, but because there's that little bit of bite built into the pedal, you don't lose all of the momentum. To my mind, that's a way of playing this song that really, really works. To have just a pure clean tone with just a bit of delay for just to strum the whole chord. On a really nice neck pickup sound as well. Make sure that you are using the neck pickup for this and don't play the low A for this, obviously, or otherwise it will kind of ruin the song. Or in the section where this is where before the piano comes in, tune up to an A, then you can get that lower note in. It really depends how you want to play it. But then to be able to switch over to something that's got a little kick in it, tiny, to do the picking on, really, really works for me. It opens up a little bit more of a an extra kind of sound to it. You can stay on just a clean tone if you want, but as I've said in a few of these videos now, I like to have that opportunity to play around with it. Obviously it's not groundbreaking, it's not reinventing the song, it's the same chords, just picking it just with a bit of drive. But something else, something to kind of change up the playing is always entertaining. It's really, really good. Or you can also pick the whole thing. But adding that variety really, really works. And so having a patch, like we've got on patch 2, which is the majority of the song, with the big, harsh tones from the prime distortion, the nice chorusy sounds for the overdrive distortion, and then using the big muff for the solo, really works with those big, huge things. But then when we want to strip back a bit, going over to D for the driver really does well to counterbalance the whole sound that you're going for. So with a huge song like Citizen Erased, which is maybe largely focused on the big tones, it's really important to remember the subtler sections and not just wanting to strip everything out. Have a little bit of bite in there, have a bit of crunch, and the delay is a lot more useful than you might think. So that was Citizen Erased. I hope you enjoyed that one. As always, remember, do let me know what you thought of this down in the comments. It'd be great to hear your feedback on it. So we've looked at the effects that we're using, the kind of the harsher distortion tones from the prime distortion for the riff, the pretty standard distortion that we're using for the chorus, and then the big muff for the huge kind of solo section, and then bringing it right down with the kind of crunchy blues drivery stuff for the more mellower sections. And they do blend really quite well together, and the delay really being used to kind of create this kind of ambience to it, and the volume pedal is really quite useful to help dial in those sorts of sounds when you really want to. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Remember, if you do like this content and you like seeing what I'm making on this channel, remember to like, share and subscribe. It really helps get this stuff out to more and more people, to help kind of share my knowledge and my experiences of playing Muse songs. It'd be great to open this community up and really see what people are using, and I'd really love for you guys to tell me what you want to see in the next video. So in the meantime, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.